Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for watching. My name is Desiree Ohrbeck, and I'm a former Danish lecturer at the Scandinavian Studies Department at the University of Washington. National Danish Book Club, a literary event series, is a program that stands on two legs. We have a book club hosted by Nete Schmidt and an interview conducted by me. This month, I am talking to Anne Cathrine Bomann about her novel Agatha. To find more information on how to sign up for the book club and watch previous videos with interviews, go to northwestdanish.org. Today, I am going to make an apple cake using the recipe from Bomann's novel, Agatha. Also, I'm wearing a perfume called Apple Crumb, and I just ordered a candle that smells like apple pie. Why is this relevant, you ask? Stay tuned and you'll find out. We are all afraid of something. The protagonist in Anne Cathrine Bomann's novel, Agatha, centers around basic and human themes such as the fear of making choices. There is something lonely about not living, is a quote from the book. And it's a sentence by the faceless psychologist who doesn't know who he is and finds life pointless. He's not able to deal with feelings of his own or those around him and has turned anger into shame. In short, he's a therapist who is not capable of internalizing his own work. Anne Cathrine's book, Agatha, is dark and ironic and funny. I mean, a therapist with no meaningful connections with those around him, forced to step outside of his comfort zone months before his retirement to engage on a personal level with two different women. Agatha is an intense and universal story about loneliness and what it means to make friends at any stage in life. It is a heartwarming and powerfully moving piece. Themes of belonging, purpose, death, loneliness, hopelessness, pain, and getting a chance to live a happy life at a late stage in life. Welcome, Anne Cathrine.
Thank you. What a great introduction.
Thank you. Is there anything you would like to add?
I think that was spot on.
Okay, thank you. So since you are yourself a therapist, I've decided to tailor this conversation about around that fact in mind. But I would like you to start with the story about how this piece of art came about, because the struggle to get it out to us was real. It's almost as if it's a part of the narrative of the story. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, the book is quite slim, but it actually took me like 3 years to write it, because it turns out it's not that easy to write a novel. So that was the first struggle. I was working full time as a psychologist back then. So I was just writing here and there, one weekend, one Friday night. So that's actually why the chapters are so short also, because I just had, a few minutes here and there. But eventually it was finished, and I began to send it out to publishers, and I just got one rejection mail after the other. And I think I counted like 13, 14 rejections from all great Danish publishers. And I was beginning to lose faith in the project. But then I found a smaller publisher who said that they would publish it if I was willing to pay a little bit. So it became sort of a hybrid thing, because they were afraid it wouldn't sell that much. And that's a bit discouraging. Nobody wants to publish it, and when finally someone does, they want me to pay for it. But I went ahead anyway. And sure enough, it didn't sell that much, but there were some kind book bloggers, and then I just had some time on my hands, and I began this weird quest of translating the first 10 pages and sending them out to publishers around Europe. And of course, no one answered me. And then I found out about literary agents, and I tried to pitch some of those. And a literary agency called Grand Agency in Sweden suddenly wrote a mail to me and said that they loved the book and they'd love to represent me if I wanted to. And I think they thought maybe 5 countries could buy it, maybe 10 if we were really lucky. And they started doing their thing. And then one day my phone rang. I was sitting at work, and they told me they had sold the rights for the first to the first country. And now today it's been 29 territories around the world. Wow. So yeah, that's a small adventure of mine with Agatha.
That's incredible. And I'm so happy because there are so many amazing sentences in this gem of a book. I'm so happy that so many people have access to actually reading it.
Thank you.
And before I move on to talking more specifically about your book, at some point in this conversation, I have to say, I want to know why people dream that they're losing their teeth. I'm sure a lot of us have wondered that, but that's on a side note.
Okay, the teeth, yeah.
And I'm asking, of course, because it's a reference to the book. But would you please give us a brief summary of like, what is this book about? What's the narrative? And maybe you could tie in the relationship you circle around between choices and freedom.
Yeah, sure. Well, the book is about a French psychiatrist. He's just called the doctor. We don't know his name. And yeah, he's just dreaming of his retirement. He has like 6 months left, and he's just, he's sick of it all. And he's leading this lonely life full of routine and yeah, no one close to him. And then suddenly enters Agatha, a younger German woman who really wants to go into therapy with him. And that sort of becomes the beginning of an awakening in him. And also his secretary calls in sick, and suddenly she asks him for help because her husband is dying. And all of these things sort of begin to turn around the doctor's life, and he has to figure out if he's going to stay hiding in his home, in his small little life, or if he's going to, for once, engage, step into life and take action. So yeah, when you talk about choices and freedom and so on, I think that one of the very important moments in the book is actually where he starts to act. He's a really passive figure, this one. That's why in the first scene of the book, I actually have him hiding behind a curtain in his own home. He doesn't even dare to go out and help this girl who's fallen from a tree. So he's literally hiding. And I wanted him to get out of the house and start acting. So for me, it's like a pivotal scene where, you know, he goes to see his secretary for the second time. The first time she forces him almost, but when he goes there alone and he decides to do something because it feels right, that's really an important choice for him to make, I think. And I think he's been like cheating himself, like thinking that there's some sort of great freedom awaiting when he retires, that he'll be rid of all the annoying people, all the patients, that's going to be somehow a greater life. But what is freedom if it's an empty life? He's free to die alone. Is that it? Mm-hmm. So he's been fooling himself, and that's what he needs to discover during the story.
Yeah, I love that juxtaposition between like an aging man who is longing for what he sees in the beginning as freedom through retirement, and then like he's a prisoner of his own mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's really beautifully written, and it reaches. I think it's amazing. But where did your inspiration come from when you started on this book?
Yeah, I think it's one of those questions where I can say something that I've figured out later, and I will, but just to say that I'm not really the planning type. So I just sat down on the computer, started writing, and out came this man. I didn't even know he was a psychiatrist at first. I just figured it all out. Like, it felt like was really alone. He was displeased in life, and so I got to know him as I was writing, and then of course later I can see that I put a lot of my own experience from being a psychologist into the book, of course. So I made him a psychiatrist and male, older, lives in a different place in a different time, but still we have a lot in common. And I was just beginning as a psychologist actually when I started writing this, so I could put a lot of my own thoughts and questions into the book, like how do you create a meaningful relationship to someone in the therapy room? Like, you need there to be a certain connection. You need to engage, but not too much, because you have to not get overwhelmed or burned out, and you need to make this connection real, and still you get paid. There are all of these things that it's a bit weird. You need to figure all that out. So I could use some of that and put it in the book. Yeah. But then I also think there are a lot of like cultural inspirations. I don't know if you know The History of Love by Nicole Krauss. No, well, I love that book, and it also has like an aging protagonist who feels invisible in life. He has this thing where he brings coins when he's going to pay, and then he makes a whole thing out of, dropping them all over the place just for someone to notice that he's alive. And yeah, and he does this croquis thing also, like screaming, could somebody please notice that I'm here? So that book was fascinating to me. And also Marie Cardinal wrote one called Les mots pour le dire in French. I don't know in English, but that's also about a therapy relationship. So I'm sure all of those things were in the back of my mind, even though consciously I wasn't thinking of them as I was writing.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, you have several places in the book where you circle around like if nobody sees me, am I here? And
yeah,
that sounds very similar to the coin thing you just described, right?
Yeah. I heard a lot of people getting older talking about this invisibility. Like, it could be you had been an attractive woman, for instance, and then something happens and suddenly nobody notices you on the street or wherever. It can feel like a loss. And I was just thinking about that also as I was writing.
Yeah, you touch on that, like the process of your mind is sort of still the same, but the shell that we call our body, that's changing, and it's really weird to have that detachment from between the mind and the body, right?
Yeah, exactly. I heard my father say that a lot, actually. Like, feels like I'm still 40 and he's in fact 84. So he can't really do all of those things that he used to, but the mind didn't age the same way that his body did. And it can feel like almost a betrayal, I think, that all of that is happening to you and you can't do all of those things you could before. So that was some of the inspiration as well. Yeah.
It's very sad, but also very beautiful, I think. Yeah. And I think, like, pivoting a little bit, but I'm so fascinated at the way you deal with the topic of making the most out of our lives. And at the same time, that has to do with that we all know what the end is, which is death, right?
Yeah.
And so I was wondering what was your thought process when you were like working with these two things in mind?
Yeah, I think it underscores that point that he is an older man. If I had used a younger protagonist, it would have been more abstract with the whole dying or death thing. But now it's not just an abstract notion to him. It's something very real that his life has almost passed, and it has passed him by, and he didn't seize it. So that's one of the reasons I think it made sense to have an older protagonist to really underscore, also to make it a bit, I know this is really no thriller. I was so afraid all the time that it was a boring book, but to put some kind of suspense in, like, is he gonna make it? Is he gonna discover what he's been doing wrong? Is he gonna be able to change his life, because maybe he doesn't have that much time left. And so that becomes sort of a driving force, I think, in the book.
That's an interesting sentence. I have to ask you about that, what you just said, because I don't get a feeling when I read it that he's actually interested in what he did wrong, but more like it's now and then forward.
Yeah, true. No, I don't think, no, that's maybe my view on him, that I want him to change something, but you're right, he's not really going back over anything, or it's not that conscious in him. I think I've been thinking more about his mental issues than he has himself.
Yeah.
Definitely.
He definitely doesn't seem like he's very out of tune with everything like that doesn't have to do with like books and analytical thinking and like thought process that has to do with himself, right? That's
he's a very detached person. That's true.
So I just have to say that this is in the beginning of the book, and I love how you give the readers little hints of the time and place that we are in. Like you describe that that the doctor is sitting with Sartre's Nausea beside him, and that he has not been able to open it up and reading it for a few years. And we know that Sartre's Nausea is from the late 1930s, so we must be in his 40s, right? And we know that Sartre is, of course, an existentialist. And I just love how you do that. Like it's like little drips, but at a level where you're not telling us, you are just showing us. And so how did you do that when you work with the text to create imagery and for time and place in your book?
Yeah, just first, I need to confess, I actually also put that in there because I myself didn't read Sartre's book, and still I felt very inspired by it because I had, of course, heard a lot about it, and I feel like I know it. And later on, I also did read it just a couple of years ago, but back then I didn't. So it was kind of a joke to me to put it in there and make him, also not having read the book. And also it hints to the whole existential vibe that I want to create in the book. And yeah, it's I tried to write as condensed as possible here, so there are no long explanations or descriptions. So as you say, I needed to make these small drops of information about time and place. And I think it helped me actually that I lived in France myself for a year when I was 18. So as I was writing, these images just came from me from this white house on Rue de Rosette where I lived, and it just felt right. It clicked, because when I started writing, I had no idea where he would live, but suddenly it felt right that it should be in France. So I could just draw on these images and that feeling that I had from staying there myself. And I changed a lot of things and names on the streets and so on, but it was still helpful for me to be able to draw on all these memories. And I worked with the language as well, making it perhaps a bit more formal, or I hope maybe poetic, something like that, also to strike a different note. So I wrote another few books which take place in present time, and they feel different in the language. So that was also a thing that helped create a certain atmosphere, I think. But also the themes are quite universal, right? So in a way, it doesn't really matter that much if it's here or there or in what time period, but still, it felt nice also maybe to say it's not about me, it's about someone else, and then it helped maybe putting it in different time and different place, if that makes sense.
It does. And I mean, I have to ask you this. So this takes place in France, and he's French, and Agatha, whom we will revisit later, is German.
Yeah.
Should I read anything into that, since this is like the beginning or maybe in the middle of the war and they are on opposite sides? Is that something you did deliberately, and what's the analysis I should take from that?
Well, not too much, actually, to be honest. Uh, I didn't want to write explicitly about the war, so I sort of tiptoed around it.
Mhm.
And then the whole German thing, I can't really explain it other than I wanted her to be like a foreigner, because they're both foreigners in life, so to speak. They're standing on the outside. It's so difficult for them to step in, both the doctor and Agatha. So I just thought I wanted to make that image even stronger by her being someone from the outside. Yeah, a bit exotic, something like that. So don't read too much into it. No.
Because I was also thinking like French and the explicit feelings and, that grandness that we, typically have. And then the Germans being very by the book and they are completely opposite in this book, right?
Yeah,
Completely
that's true.
opposite. She's super deep and understands feeling, even his feelings, and where he is like way more literally by the book.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't think about it that way, but it's funny, actually. He even does this thing where he buys the same shirts and just places them like really in the cupboard. So yeah, he's more like the prototype of the German, if you will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I want to, so when I got this book in my hands, I looked, of course, at the front page and I read on the back, and then it said, can you help someone find a way to live when you are lost yourself? Right?
Yeah.
And would you say that even though he is lost and he, until this point at least, doesn't know how to help himself, would you say that he's been able to help his clients?
Yeah, great question. I'll just start somewhere else, because I thought about this in relation to table tennis a few times. I used to play a lot of table tennis, and we had this player on the male national team called Michael Mace, and he was incredibly good, world class player. And then he had a coach who wasn't that great in playing, but he was a fantastic coach. So I sometimes made that analogy, like he was able to help Michael Mace become one of the best in the world, and he could see the patterns of what to do, what not to do, create great tactics, all of that. So I have this feeling that on some level you can help someone even though you're lost or you don't have all the tools yourself. Mm-hmm. But of course, in therapy, it is important that you have a great feeling of the psyche, and also that you know yourself, because if you don't, you risk putting all of your own emotional things into the therapy without knowing it. So of course it is important to know something also about life, which our doctor clearly lacks. He's more of a book guy up until now, but I still have this feeling that he helps his clients, and maybe just even by being there. I heard people say that when they go to the psychologist or whoever, just having someone who's there only for them for a whole hour, they can talk about anything they want, and that person is listening, giving them their undivided almost attention. That's already something. So I think it feels helpful for a lot of his clients. Mm-hmm. And still he could be a lot better. Right? We can agree on that.
Well, yeah, there is this lady who is just like, she's so grumpy and she's complaining about everything, and for years he's just let her like babble on until he's finally had enough. So there is a change there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But I don't know if that's okay. As you say, he's been letting her on for years, just making his small drawings. Maybe they think he's writing some brilliant notes, but he's actually just making this caricatures. And so he's not the greatest therapist, that's for sure. But there are not so many options back then. So you could be perhaps heavily medicated or put into some hospital, and like Agatha has tried before. So maybe he's one of the better options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So your book has so many existential questions, and I'm just going to read a few of them. Like, how do you help a stranger to a good death when you can't even work out how to live your own life is one. How does one get inside life? And how do we form meaningful relationships with the finality of death ever present? And if the meaning of life is to mean something to someone, but you are utterly lonely, then what's the point of living? Those are some of the questions that you ask in your book. And I was wondering, how do you think your protagonist would answer these questions in the beginning and at the end of the book?
Well, there are certainly, difficult questions, and I put them in there in part because I don't have the answers either, so, but definitely, I think he improves his understanding of the questions, as the story evolves, because I think one thing that he learns is that perhaps you don't always have to have the perfect thing to say, like looking up in your book and knowing exactly what to say when somebody is in front of you. Maybe sometimes it's actually more important to be there, and that's what's so difficult for him. If you remember, there's a scene where one of his patients has lost his wife in the beginning of the book, and the doctor has no idea what to do, because this calls for just empathy, being there with him in this difficult situation. There's nothing to fix, because you can't really do that, and he has no clue what to do.
He literally says, "What does this man want from me?"
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what? Yeah, I remember that scene very clearly. I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, that's not great. And that improves later, of course, when he's with Thomas, for instance, the secretary's dying husband, that there he's more authentic in saying, wow, I'm lost too, I'm afraid too. And sometimes that's actually more helpful than some professional telling you something, just meeting the person, human to human. And I think that's something that if we could ask the doctor, he would tell us that at least he learned something about that during the book. And also about stepping into life and all of that. Maybe he learns that, it feels like I'm quoting Eminem here, but something about needing to lose yourself sometimes, that if you are truly engaged in the other, or you're doing something that interests you so much that you get into a sort of flow, then maybe those are the moments where we feel like we manage to get into life, into living, instead of just standing there outside watching. So I think he has some moments perhaps with Agatha when she confronts him, sees him, or when he helps Thomas, the dying husband. I think he has some moments where he feels like, okay, I was actually just living without constantly being in my head. Yeah.
So that brings me to, the scene where he's in the bathroom and then he's washing his hands and he looks up and he's not there, he's faceless. And then a second later he realizes, oh, this bathroom doesn't have a mirror. I really like that scene. And that ties in, I think, to what you just said. Like it was a changing moment, I think, one of the changing moments in the book, but also like, if I don't see myself, do I exist, and how do I then exist for in helping others? And would you say a little bit about how you work with this?
I think seeing yourself more truly and also being seen by someone else is really important themes in the book. It can feel so lonely if nobody sees you, and since he's never showing anything of himself, he's always this professional doctor, then how can anyone get close to him? How can he ever be seen or loved by anyone? And that can be terribly painful. So that's a very important theme in the book. And I actually had the feeling that I wanted the book to end badly in the beginning. I thought it should be dark and twisty, and if it should be a true existentialist book, it should go downhill. But then something happened, and the doctor, the character, took over, and he began taking action and doing things, and then suddenly this message evolved, or whatever you want to call it, about how love or connection to other people, how being seen can actually create meaning and make this difficult life worthwhile. So it wasn't really intended, but now I can see it also in some of my other books, that if my characters are able to connect with someone, it could be a friend or a relative, a loved one, that can make all the difference, even though they struggle with very different difficult things, or even though life is perhaps still absurd or meaningless. Then if you're truly seen for who you are and loved, then it sounds so cheesy, right? But then that can make it all worthwhile.
Yeah, and then the question is, who actually sees us for who we are? Because you also deal with that, like who we are within the privacy of our lives, and who we are out and about, and that's also shown through Agatha, right? I'm really happy you didn't end on that like short note in the book, because at some point there is a scene where he's living next door. He's in an apartment, and next door those who have lived in an apartment knows this, that you can hear your neighbor's sounds, like when they flush the toilet, when they get up at night to get a glass of water or whatever. And he finds comfort in knowing that his neighbor is right there, and they share the same like sounds of a life being lived. And then he finds out that the neighbor cannot, he's dead, right? And that was like such a punch to the stomach. Like his loneliness is completely, like utterly, it's just there. So
it's monumental.
It's monumental. You could have ended the book there. I'm glad you didn't.
No.
But so apparently, according to your protagonist, if you want to change, like we're like slowly moving in that direction with this conversation, right? You have to, as you state on page 89, start with your greatest longing to work out what you are afraid of. And so I'm wondering if that is what he's doing when he's like almost stalking, or at least following Agatha. And also, is that what he's doing, like facing his greatest fears when he's showing up at his secretary's house?
Yeah, it's actually Thomas who says these words to him, because he's thinking, how do I know what I'm so afraid of? How do I figure this out? And then Thomas, the secretary's husband, says to him, you need to start with your greatest longing. And it was one of those sentences that just came out of my hands. And then later on, I had to try to figure out what that could mean. But I guess you could interpret it in different ways. But to me, the doctor, he's so afraid of other people getting close to him. He's so afraid of being rejected, I think. So if you love someone, if you dare to do that, if you let them in and they see you, you might be rejected. And that's his greatest fear. But at the same time, that's the one thing missing in his life to make him, I don't know if complete is too big a word, but at least to make it worthwhile. So that's it to me, the relation with someone special. That's what he needs, and that's what frightens him the most. And that's also why his anxiety is rising through the novel, because as he's starting to wake up and engage, that feels terrifying to him. So I think you're right, he's facing his fear head on as he goes to see his secretary. And I don't know about this whole following Agatha thing, what that's about. I think to me it has something to do with when he wakes up, a whole lot of feelings like passion and whatever is rising in him, and he needs to channel it better. But in the beginning, I think it's a bit out of control. So it's like all over the place or something like that. And he's only human, and he's been a sleepwalker for so many years, and now suddenly he's waking up, and maybe he's a bit too fascinated by this young woman, and who's one of the sources or the catalyst for his change. So yeah, that's not a great therapist walking around there looking in his patient's windows, but yeah, he needs to get that sorted out.
But I also, you know what, I was really fascinated by how you hone in on her lips when he's observing her through the window. Because he's so like, he's really drawn to her lips, and the lips are of course also what she uses when she's in therapy with him. But those lips that he's so obsessed with in the, like when he watches her with her friends through the window, what comes out of those lips is like when she goes home after and she just cries and cries, maybe what came out there with her friends were not the real her. And is it the real her when she speaks through her lips at his office? Like there's so much with those lips. What did you think about that when you were writing?
I thought about, no, I didn't think about it that much. I think your interpretation is smarter, more clever than I never thought about it that much. But you're right. I think she's doing what most of us have done at some point or another. At least I know I have that. Even though we have some problems when we go out, we try sometimes to put on a happy face and just maybe try to enjoy ourselves, or at least pretend that we are with our friends. So maybe she's putting on a bit of a show at the cafe, or maybe she is even having an okay time. I'm not even sure. And then she goes home and cries. And that could be because she's thinking about all the stupid things she said, or how she's been actually acting in front of her friends instead of being honest. I don't know. But to me, she's quite a complex figure. She has all of these different sides. She's strong and radiant and still weakened by all of the things that happened to her. She's really struggling in life. So she has all this, is a great range of emotions, and that fascinates him too, because he's been so stagnated and never felt a thing for so many years, or so it feels. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to revisit her in a second, because like her zest for life and her longing for death is something I find very interesting. But before that, I want to ask you something else, because your characters are human with characteristics that I think most of us recognize, but do not like to dwell on, because it's not accepted in society. So like we might know someone who's suffering and not reaching out, or we might try to find our place in life, both personally, but also in our social circles. Why do you think that feelings like this, that are so universal, are still so full of shame and something that we want to hide from other people?
Yeah, great question. Sometimes I'm thinking if we could just all count to 3 and then just relax and be honest about what we're thinking and feeling, but maybe that's a frightening thought as well. But yeah, it's a great question. I think if we think about it like more scientifically, maybe it has to do with, it's really important to be in the group. We need to fit in. In earlier days, it could be life-threatening if we did something to get cast out of the group. So that's one explanation. And also today, of course, we're raised to put forward some sides of us, some parts of us, and some feelings and other things are shameful, or we're told to put away, or we are scolded for them. And sometimes, sadly, that can make us feel like we're the only ones feeling these things. We can feel wrong and ashamed. And as you point out, most of it is something that we share with so many others. So it's really, it's sad sometimes how much we can struggle with things that are actually universal. And that's why it can be such a great relief to talk to someone about it and figure out, you feel that too. It's not just me.
Yeah. It's interesting how we that validation is so important to most of us, right? That we're not completely crazy, or whatever that word even means, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to meet her, Agatha. You have promised to read from your book, and I'm so excited. So let's turn to page 80. And if you read from page 80 to, like, I think we talked about, you just read whatever you feel like, and then stop whenever you feel like it.
Okay, sure. Agatha 7. I think I was angry. No, I know I was. Back then, I just didn't dare feel it. But I stopped singing. I hardly ever touched the piano again. And that was when I started cutting my forearms. From the chair behind her, I could make out the soft roundness of her cheeks, see the fine network of wrinkles around her eyes tighten. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. What's your opinion, doctor? Can one replace the piano with a paring knife? Laughter moved furtively in her voice. Well, why not? I replied. Just think of all the art that's been produced through suffering and sublimation. She wore a bottle green frock and some type of grey blouse on top of it. Dark shoes with a small heel, which jutted a fraction over the edge of the couch. Her feet tilted back and forth, first one way, then the other. Anyway, that's how it started. Ever since then, I've cut myself, pulled out my hair, hit myself with different things, and banged my head against the wall until it bled. And I can assure you, it works better than ether and sleeping pills. That may be so, but it works by drowning out the pain, not by removing it. You can't pretend you're actually solving anything by banging your head against the wall, Agatha. You're just punishing yourself for something you didn't do. It annoyed me that I sounded so old, and when her smile widened, I was sure it was an amusement at me. No, doctor, she said, you're right. So you would suggest I stop? How original. Tell me, is this a joke to you? I blurted out. I can promise you it isn't, she answered sharply. I'm buried alive in my own existence. One would think you could see through the gallows humor of a condemned woman. I leant towards her. But what is it you did so wrong, Agatha? Why are you so angry with yourself? She clicked her tongue. Have you even been listening, doctor? Yes, I believe so. But indulge me. Explain it so I understand it. She exhaled audibly through her fringe, blowing it upwards. Her voice was back to its normal cadence as she replied, I'm angry because I haven't accomplished anything. I should have been someone, and I'm nothing. For the first time during our sessions, the moisture in her eyes coalesced into a tear, which ran along her temple and continued down her white throat. I had to focus intently to keep track of the conversation so that I didn't intermingle all my images of Agatha. I apologize if this is banal. I'm sure you've heard it before, but I really thought I was something special, she said. And you still do, at least in part, I replied, or you wouldn't be so angry. Yet, at the same time, what do you mean? She sniffed, whisking away the tear with the back of her hand. I mean, you feel utterly unique and completely relevant at the same time. She nodded slowly. I think you're right there. One moment I don't think I deserve to live, and the next, there's no one to match me. Silly, isn't it?
That's an amazing chapter. I love it.
Thank you.
What do you have anything you want to say before I start asking?
No, you can just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so she is so much alive, right? And she has bright and intense eyes. She has that zest of life we just talked about. But I also get the feeling that she might be fooling her therapist. Is she?
To me, she's not, but tell me more, maybe. How do you think she's doing that?
Well, she's definitely mocking him, like, how original, is that the best you can do, doctor?
Yeah.
And also other places in the book where it's as if she's feeding him different pieces. And I know that that's probably like what people do, right? Little by little, the therapist is opening up their clients or something. I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, but it just feels like she's in control of this. I mean, she is crying, yes, one single tear. But I'm just wondering if that control of the situation is control of her or the situation in the room, or if she's manipulating him, or like, was that on your mind when you were writing this?
No, I think what I tried to do was grasp some complexity and some ambivalence, and also to show something about how, just as you suggest, that it takes time sometimes, and it takes trust in order for someone to tell you the whole story. And sometimes you don't know it yourself, so you can't just walk in there the first time or the second and tell it how it is, because it's a mess to yourself as a client. And I think she's not able to tell him about the abuse that she's undergone before he has this almost like breakdown where she confronts him suddenly in therapy, because there he shows her that he's human as well, that he has flaws, and he's honest, perhaps almost for the first time. He gives something of himself, and then the next time she can give him this information. So it's also, perhaps it's not a game, but it's some, you give something, I give something, and it takes time to develop. And yeah, she is complex, because she also went in there in like the first time she's there, she demands to get therapy, and then later she's this weak woman who's struggling, and she can't even get out of bed. So it's a bit all over the place, and we don't get her whole story. I've heard people ask me to write another book from her perspective, because there's so much we don't get from her. We only get these small pieces. So I'm sure she's keeping stuff to herself as well.
Is that something you're considering doing?
No, I thought about it, and then I was just so afraid of ruining something, because people make their own ideas and stories and pictures, and I don't know if I could get it right, so to speak, and also I feel finished with it, so it's not going to happen, but I understand the urge to know more about her.
And maybe there are like a gazillion Agathas running around in people's minds, and they have their own lives now.
Yeah, there could be. It's funny to talk to people sometimes and just hear how many things they thought about. Also, when you present some of your questions now, I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting, I never thought about it that way. And that happens to me all the time. So that's what happens when you write a book. You do something with it, you put it out there, and then it has its own life in people's minds, and that's quite interesting.
That must be very interesting that you have this piece and it's in your control until it's not.
Yeah, exactly. Frightening.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a conversation we could go and explore, but yeah. we don't have a lot of time left. I do want to ask something though, because there is a lot of references to the therapist sketching in his little book, and you just read that this quote, like, think about the arts that's been produced through suffering and sublimation, says the therapist, right? And he's constantly sketching while talking to his clients.
Yeah.
Do you think that he would have rather been an artist creating and drawing his own pain than a therapist fixing something that has been broken? So like that creative and a creator versus someone who's fixing something that was created.
Another great question. Not in my mind. I don't know, maybe it could have been that way, but maybe I put some of my own thing in there too, like creating books and making art out of sublimation, something like that. And I wanted to have a bit of Freud in there as well. And the sketches, I mean, there are a lot of things in them. They create some more layers on the patients that he has, and it introduces a bit of humor as well. And it also gives us this feeling that he's not fully invested because he's just sitting there doodling, doing his own thing. So it's also to show us something about him. But he learned to draw from his father, but I think his father, it's not that he takes up that much space in the novel, but you get this feeling that he was quite distanced, and that maybe the doctor wasn't allowed to participate that much in the whole art thing. So maybe it's mixed for him, so he can only do these caricatures. He wouldn't dare, I think, try to produce art himself, because that was his father's thing. But it was just a fun thought for me that he was making also this Madame d'Almeida. She's this ostrich or whatever it's called. So yeah, I just thought that was funny.
It is funny, and also because he's so detached from his feelings, right? But art is about creating from your emotions and feelings.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but I doodle too sometimes in therapy, and it's also just a way to. It can be very intense doing therapy if you're just looking straight into somebody's eyes. So sometimes it's just a way of creating some kind of. You're not 100% focused, but it's on another level, and you can listen in another way because you're relaxed. So yeah, that can help as well to just keep your hand moving and just being in it.
Okay. Okay, so on a lighter note, what is it with the gourmand in your story, like the baked apple pie or cake and the cinnamon, and like you mentioned smells, and it really creates an atmosphere when you read. But what is it you wanted with that?
Well, I remember writing a scene where he cooked something first, and then later on it made more sense for me for him to bake this cake to the neighbor and to create this whole trace of apples through the book. But I think I wanted to show that he begins engaging in life, and then something about the senses being turned on as well. So smelling, tasting, something like that. And then just also the apples, of course, they had something to do with his mother, so presumably someone he loved. And then when we connect them to Agatha, it shows us that she's important, and it also gives more weight to the apple pie when he bakes that and gives it to the neighbor. So it's one of those things that I really didn't plan for, but suddenly I just saw a trace of apples in the book, and I just went with it.
I love it. I mean, the time we are recording this is actually Halloween here in the States. And, you know, the fall leaves, the smells, it's so full of, like, apples, we connotate that with the fall, right? And he's in the fall stage of his life, but it's also something soft and warm and full of spices if you put it with some cinnamon and stuff. It's just so beautiful and vibrant and alive, as well as calm in a way. I just really love those images.
Yeah, thank you. And did you say that did you bake the cake, or you wanted to bake the cake? Or
so I wanted to bake the cake, but I didn't have time. But I have visitors coming over for trick-or-treat tonight, and I want to make sure that I bake the cake. I really hope it's a real recipe, otherwise it will be a disaster.
It is a real recipe, but maybe you can add some more spices and spice it up a bit. Okay. It's a bit to the plain side, I think, but yeah, it should work.
I'll add some allspice and some cinnamon, but I'm going to make it tonight. And yeah, I have the whole house decorated in fall color, so it will be perfect.
Perfect.
And then let's get that thing about losing your teeth out of the way. What does it mean?
The teeth, To be honest, I got it from one of those small books that I got it from a friend, and it's just like, if you dream this, what does it mean? You can just look up, and it's like a dream dictionary or something. And in there it says that it's about growing older, losing beauty, losing vitality, losing power, control, all of those things. And I dream it too sometimes. It's horrible, like, spitting out your teeth and they're alive.
It's not funny. It just sounds funny.
But it's a dream. It's very common. Lots of us have it. So it is interesting. But yeah, that's my best guess. But I'm really no what's it called, expert on the subject.
I told my husband, because he dreams it quite a lot. I've never dreamt it, but I dream other things that I outside of this would like to ask about.
Yeah, just call me.
I might do that. So this has been an absolute pleasure. I mean, what a great conversation, and like I love to hear love hearing your thoughts about this. Is there anything you would like to add, or you think we haven't touched on that you would really like us to know about?
I think we covered a lot of things, and I must say I've been asked a lot of questions about the books throughout the years here, and you asked a lot of new ones, so that was great for me. So it's really nice to talk to you about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So before we end, I would like to take a moment to thank the Scandesign Foundation, Danish American Heritage Society, and Scandinavian Studies Department at University of Washington for their financial contribution in making the National Danish Book Club and Literary Event Series possible, and the Elverhøj Museum for being promotional partners, as well as the National Foundation of Danish America and the National Nordic Museum. Thank you again, Anne Cathrine, so very much.
Thank you too, and thank you for all the kind words on the book.
You're very welcome. I meant each and every one of them. So to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.